Hi, I'm Sam Terrell with the Martin Outdoor Property Group and LandLeader, and I'm excited to introduce the first episode in a three-part series with the Rogue River Watershed Council discussing land stewardship and live water. In this episode, we will join Chris Martin and the team from the Rogue River Watershed Council for an introduction to stream bank regulations. Brian, Lance, and Emily from the RRWC discuss the principles surrounding conservation work done near streams and rivers in riparian areas. They shed light into the complicated regulatory framework encompassing what is allowable in this category of conservation. As they unpack riparian guidelines, rules, and how plans are prepared for restoration projects, we dive into how these projects improve water quality, fish habitat, and microorganism habitat, all while benefiting the end users, including irrigation districts and farmers. Brian, Lance, and Emily break down stream and river classifications, definitions, and how water that you see today may be different in times of high flow events. They discuss permitting and how landowners can approach these projects and determine what is and what is not allowable in riparian areas. We are honored to be hosting the Rogue River Watershed Council, and we're excited to share the work that they are doing to bolster the health of water systems, in addition to helping landowners create a beautiful aesthetic through the process. If you are a landowner, please watch this video. And if you're somebody that knows somebody with property on a river or stream, please share this video with them. We hope you enjoy the conversation, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome, guys. So today we're going to talk a little bit about land stewardship and live water. The goal for the video today is to explain basically three things. One is going to be to talk a little bit about regulation, or kind of the rules pertaining to, we'll call it riparian areas along streams, riparian areas along rivers, and I'll let you guys kind of explain kind of the classifications or how that works. And obviously there's a lot more than we can cover in video, so we're going to get kind of a high level picture today. The second thing is, what does the actual work look like? What can I do along my stream, and what does that physically look like? We're sitting on one of those projects today, and we'll throw some B-roll in so that people can see what this looks like today. And the last thing is the idea of collaboration. And the collaboration meaning between property owner and Rogue River Watershed Council and or other organizations like yourselves, and how that might be a benefit both to the overall stream health, but also to the landowner, and things like property value going up, or improvements to irrigation delivery systems, or whatever that might be. There's a whole bunch of overlap in the collaboration from my observation that can be a benefit. So we're going to get into that towards the end. Before we get started, I want to introduce the folks we have here as our guests today. We had an opportunity recently to partner with, I'm going to say, or sponsor the Rogue River Watershed Council's annual, help me with the
annual fundraising dinner, Celebrate the Rogue.
Perfect. So I just want to introduce our guests here real quick. So Brian, if you would start.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So I am Brian Barr. I'm the Executive Director of the Rogue River Watershed Council, and I've been here for just short of 10 years, which is the length of that the organization has been active. I'm a fisheries biologist by training. I grew up in the Midwest and steadily made my way south and east through college. Got a graduate degree from Virginia Tech, and then came west to actually start my career, which was back in 1995. So I've been working on Western streams for just short of 30 years at this point.
Awesome.
Lance Wise, I'm the restoration biologist for the Watershed Council. I've been doing this stream restoration for over 10 years now. I have a fisheries and wildlife degree from Oregon State University, and I was doing research for a decade before that. So I have roughly 24, 25 years of working in and along streams.
Perfect. Emily?
I'm Emily Ullman. I am one of the new restoration project managers with the Watershed Council, but I've been in the industry of water resources for about 5 years now. I came from North Carolina. I have a degree in plant biology from NC State, and I was working in the stream and wetland mitigation banking crediting world before this, so I'm super excited to be working for the Watershed Council.
So the general topic of regulation. What am I allowed to do along my water frontage, my creek, my river, my pond? so on and so forth. You want to take us away with a little bit of an overview of the regulation piece?
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for that. So the Rogue River Watershed Council does a lot of work along streams and within streams. The regulatory framework, the rules that apply to working below the ordinary high water mark on streams is pretty complicated, and then there are a lot of agencies involved. We're really going to focus today on talking about working along the stream in the riparian forest area. Also applies to lakes and wetlands for that matter, and not so much in the stream itself.
So that would be like basically the live water flow in the stream or the high water mark. Is that how it would be defined?
Yeah, right. So the way the regulators, the way even right now, right here, we're sitting in the stream. So adding material or taking material away from the spot where we're sitting now requires some thought and conversation with a fairly lengthy number of agencies that regulate those sorts of activities. We also happen to be in an area that's a riparian forest. And so there are rules and regulations that govern the sorts of things that you can do to the vegetation growing in these areas. And those regulations mostly run to county, or if you live in a city, city ordinances.
So there's basically three layers of complication, I'll put it. There's in-stream, there's riparian, and then there's everything else on your land outside of riparian. And that's not to count floodplains and other overlays like that. We're not going there.
We're not going there. Again, there's a lot to unpack in that, and we've got a relatively small interview session here, short interview session.
This would be a multi-day.
That could be a multi-day conversation,
yes.
Absolutely.
Again, so the idea, we're going to unpack mostly that riparian area, not so much in-stream.
Correct.
Who would be the primary governing agency for in-stream if you had to pick one or two that you have to deal with?
Yeah, well, there's two biggies. Again, if you're talking two big agencies that are going to govern that work, that is mostly related to removing material or adding material, and that's the Army Corps of Engineers and the Oregon Department of State Lands.
Okay.
There are a few other organizations or agencies that get involved depending on exactly what you're doing. If you're working with flow or diversion structures, you might have to interact with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Water Resources Department.
One of the things I see oftentimes with landowners, whether it's a new landowner or whether it is someone who's owned their property for 100 years in the same family, there's a general lack of understanding of riparian guidelines. So like with the riparian area, can you give kind of a brief overview without going into too much detail of how the rules are established and what you're looking for when you're preparing a plan for a restoration project?
Sure, that's a great question. And it's really not that complex, and I don't really think it's that complicated. The complication really comes down to the rules are different everywhere you stand, pretty much.
Sure.
So if you're in a city, they have their own sets of ordinances that vary among those different cities.
So if you're in Eagle Point, it's going to be different than Jackson County versus Josephine County, so on and so forth.
Correct. Josephine County is different than Jackson County. Grants Pass is different than Josephine County.
Yep.
Eagle Point is different than Medford, is different from Ashland.
Sure.
And they're all different from Jackson County with the exact rules. But the general guiding principles are the same, which is that particularly woody vegetation, shrubs and trees, and it's really their roots of those shrubs and trees, help make the banks along the stream stable. Not ironclad stable, but not subject to unusual levels of erosion.
Okay.
That's very protective for all the critters that live in the creek next to those riparian forests. They also provide, that woody vegetation provides habitat for wildlife. It also provides shade that helps keep stream temperatures cooler and without huge day-night fluctuations. Here we're particularly talking about July, August, September, when the air temperature is really warm. in the middle of the day at least, or at the tail end of the afternoon. And then, maybe getting a little bit deeper into the biology of things. All of this woody material growing along the stream, the leaves that form on the deciduous trees have a lot of benefits to what happens biologically and ecologically inside the stream itself. Helps keep the stream healthy. Sure. So we want to have forests growing along streams. And that's what the regulations are designed to help promote.
So
healthy forests making healthy streams.
And maybe this is an oversimplification from my perspective, but it seems like what you're talking about is water quality. You're talking about fish habitat.
Yep.
And then you're talking about all the microorganism habitat, if I'm using the right.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Yeah. You're right, the right term.
Yeah.
So it overall working together to improve all of those, and the extra benefit to the land is that in many ways you're restoring it to its original, native condition, and as a result it's not overgrown by blackberries and all the other invasive species. Is that kind of where we're going with?
Yeah,
with that?
Absolutely, Chris. That's a great point. So, right, those noxious plants that can sort of take over, particularly blackberry in our region is a biggie. Those produce really unhealthy conditions both for the stream and for wildlife habitat as well. So, I think that fish habitat, yeah, but also, we've been watching golden eagles and kingfishers, flickers, and all kinds of cool birds, winter birds in the area cruising around this forest. We want to make habitat for those critters as well. And I think it's aesthetically very pleasing. And it makes this area, so we're on a project right now that the Rogue River Watershed Council worked with the landowner on. Where we're sitting now, we could not have been sitting here, at least not like this, 4 years ago, because this was a thicket of blackberry, probably 15 feet high. We would not be sitting here.
I remember.
And the landowner would not be able to walk from their property across the road, across this nice riparian forest, and take advantage of looking at this beautiful stream running right along the edge of their property. So I think there's a real value for the property owner to being able to interact with their stream frontage.
Well, one other benefit I see that is in your guys' model, but it's also from a farming perspective, the cleaner you can keep this water, the better it's going to be, not just for the wildlife and not just for fish and not just but for irrigation water. There's
Absolutely.
dozens and dozens of people who pull water. The irrigation districts pull water. The lower the nitrate, the lower the bacteria levels is going to be better for agriculture as well.
Absolutely.
So.
And to add to that, Little Butte Creek, this is the South Fork of Little Butte. Little Butte Creek flows into the Rogue right upstream of the Medford Water Commission's intake. So having cleaner water is beneficial for everyone who lives in Medford and drinks
100%.
city water. I would like to go back once more on the regulation.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the Watershed Council does with private landowners and contractors is get rid of all those non-native blackberries. And that counts as disturbing the vegetation regulation-wise is in Jackson and Josephine County. And so you have to have a permit, and we get the permits to remove the non-native blackberry to start off with.
Well, let's go back even a little bit further and talk about, there's different classifications of streams. So we're on Little Butte Creek, South Fork. How is this stream classified, or how is it looked at as far as riparian area setbacks? What does that breadth of regulation look like for that?
Jackson County is 50 feet
50
from
feet
the edge of water.
From edge of water.
Yep.
Now, is that defined as edge of water or high water mark?
I believe it's top of bank.
Yeah.
So again,
this is where
this is where it gets a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so that's why, I think whenever people should not be afraid to ask these questions of folks. Most of us think that the creek starts right there, but right there would have been different in the middle of a big rainstorm event or a rain on storm event. Right there, the edge of the water is maybe going to be, 100 feet that direction. So where's the edge of the creek? And it's defined, this definition of a place called top of bank. And you kind of need somebody who knows how to identify the top of bank to find the top of bank.
Who makes that call?
Usually the regulator, so in this case it would be Jackson Jackson County would
Okay.
defer to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to make the call on where is the top of the bank. And the top of the bank is defined as about every 2 years in a 2-year flood event or flow event. What's the level of the water?
We're actually sitting probably within that.
We're in it.
That live water or the in-stream area.
Yep.
So it's 50 feet from somewhere behind us. Over here is where the riparian area.
Like right there.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, you can see where that there's a, the people on camera can't see, unfortunately, but there's a rise over here to my left, to our left, and that's the top of bank.
And
so
then
they would
50
start
feet beyond
measuring
that.
50 feet perpendicular to the stream, that direction.
Okay, so
Right.
anywhere in that area, if you want to do, what was the word you used? Disturbance?
Yeah, if you want to remove even non-native blackberry, you
does-
have to have a permit. to do it.
Riparian restoration plan, is that the right?
Yeah,
term?
they call it a landscape plan
Okay.
that you have to have approval from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and you turn that in. A landowner would turn that into Jackson County.
Can you define some activities that would be exempt from that permit, like limbing up of dead limbs on an existing tree or something like that?
That would qualify as.
What else
an
would
exempt.
qualify as being exempt? Rough.
So you could mow the grass to keep fire prevention down, things like that. Limbing is another one that you could probably do. Other than that, I'm not sure there's much you can actually do. I mean, without disturbing the vegetation.
And then again, that changes whether you're in that riparian area or whether you're in the in-stream area. In the in-stream area is markedly more restrictive, correct?
Yes,
And I know we're not going too deep into that
Yeah.
one today. And that's a whole nother can
that's
of
a
worms.
whole nother can of worms.
I would say generally, if a landowner is interested in removing vegetation that's woody, so that includes blackberries, but doesn't include like common mullein, right?
Right.
But if you're removing woody vegetation, then you should have that landscape plan approved by ODF&W and submitted to Jackson County before you pursue that work.
And that's where we fit in. If you're voluntarily working with us as a landowner, we take care of all that stuff.
Yeah.
We design those projects with a landowner to what their goal of their property is, and then the permitting, all of the permitting, whether it's in stream or the riparian permitting, we take care of that.
Yeah, so my general understanding would be you as the property owner can make application yourself. You can hire a contractor and hopefully they will make the application correctly. There are a few of them out there who
Sure.
will. You can hire a land use planner, a land use attorney to prepare said application, or you can work with an organization like yourselves who are in the business of doing this. For lack of, I know you're
Yeah,
a nonprofit,
no,
but you're in the business of
We're a
doing
business.
this. So those are your four options, basically. I've seen many times where this is my gripe is you'll see a contractor who says, oh yeah, I can do that. And then they lead a property owner down the wrong series of steps and they just end up going through and not actually making application and they change things dramatically. I've seen that a lot. So you touched briefly on why these rules are in place for fish habitat, so on and so forth. Actually, before we go down that road, let's back up to the up. So this is it's a fish-bearing stream, 50-foot setback. So there are a couple other classifications, like you'd find on the Rogue River would be considered a navigable waterway. And what kind of setback would you have on the Rogue?
I believe in Jackson County, the setback is 75 feet on the Rogue.
That's what I've been telling people. I hope
In
so.
Josephine County, it's, I think it's everything within the 100-year floodway.
Okay.
So, I'm not even sure exactly what within the 100-year.
Well, you guys work in Jackson County, so I'll hold you to the Jackson County.
Well,
one.
we work a little bit in Josephine County. We're working in Jackson County.
So
We're
75
in Jackson County now.
So the largest riparian area is 75 feet in Jackson County. This fish-bearing stream, or what's the other classification you guys would call this?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
that's I think the rule that it falls within.
Okay, would be
fish-bearing.
50-foot setback from the top of bank. And then there's another classification, isn't that for like seasonal streams or non-fish-bearing
Yeah.
streams you guys have to work with?
Yes, and that depends. Again, all of this depends on where exactly you're at. I believe the city of Ashland has 4 classifications.
Sure.
So they have non-fish-bearing streams and then intermittent streams.
Oh yeah.
And it's important, something that's important that I think a lot of folks in our area don't understand is even though some streams don't carry water all year long, that doesn't actually mean they're not important for fish. We have summer steelhead in the Rogue River Basin, some of those summer steelhead are going to use intermittent streams as spawning habitat. So, I like to tell people all streams are important, even if you don't identify it as a stream when you're looking at it on August 15th.
Sure.
So there's those 4 general classifications, and generally as you go down that order from navigable to fish bearing to non-fish bearing to intermittent, the distance from top of bank in which you need a permit to disturb woody vegetation shrinks in size. So the intermittent streams, it's something like 20 or 25 feet.
We touched briefly on the riparian plan. What does that plan need to include? Like, what does that look like when you're saying, hey, I need to put together this plan? Talk me through briefly what those steps are to develop that plan and get it approved.
Yeah, this is a great question for Lance. I think Lance is the one that is most knee-deep in plan development for the Watershed Council.
Yeah, so there are guidelines, regulations, and they use stems per acre.
Okay.
So you have to have a certain number of trees and shrubs per acre. And that is essentially the pinch point of getting a permit. And how you get to that point, there are different ways.
So you're developing an actual landscape plan then for the section of creek or river that you're improving, or what does that look like?
Yes, because the Watershed Council and the county and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife work together so much, it's mostly a narrative that I can write. And the Watershed Council actually has kind of a programmatic long-term riparian ordinance permit with Jackson County. So if a landowner wants to work with us, I can develop this project with the landowner and basically submit some verbal communication with Jackson County and a fish biologist at Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's approved.
Okay. So how long does something like that take from when you put boots on the ground on a property to getting an approval and being cleared to begin work?
A normal project, when we know we're going to do work with someone, it's an email, and we have a riparian permit.
So it's almost, they've given you guys a rubber stamp to basically, if you're going to do this project, we trust you, send us the paperwork, and we're going to green light it. So how long would it take the landowner to get that approved if they started from scratch?
I would think it would probably take 3 to 5 months to do it.
So that's a huge difference. I'm gonna take an example of something that I see a lot of property owners do, and I want to get your kind of take on it from a science perspective. So a lot of people say to me, well, if I open up the bank and I create a rolling lawn down to the edge of the water, because that's what everyone's looking for, right? From their home, that golf course setting on their river or creek or whatever. Can you help us understand the actual science behind what damage that does to the stream?
Sure, this could be a little bit of a round robin here as we tick through from our different
Reader's
perspectives.
Digest version.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I don't want to get too deep into the science part, but again, it comes back to those really big beneficial uses that streams provide to all of us, that we're trying to protect that sort of development from impacting. So one biggie is that if you remove all of the overstory trees that provide shade onto the stream, you are encouraging the stream to get warmer at a time of the year when it's really warm. And most of our native fish species in the Rogue and all of the native fish species that people go out on Saturdays and Sundays and fish for really like cold water, cool, cold water. So we don't want to make all the water necessarily cold enough to support salmon and trout, but we want to keep those places that should have salmon and trout cold enough to have salmon and trout. And the shade from these trees, the riparian forest, is one of the things that helps keep that water from getting really warm. And honestly, the forest itself does the exact same thing. I don't know if anybody's ever had that opportunity. I know at least a couple of us here have, and Chris, you probably have, where you're walking through a oak woodland, approaching a stream, and then you get into a nice riparian forest area, and you might be 150 meters or yards away from the edge of the water, and the air temperature drops 10 or 15 degrees right there.
100%.
That's just like a thermos, right? Keeping a cool area cooler.
Well, it's insulating.
It's It's absolutely it's functioning exactly as insulation.
And I've seen that before. I mean, I've caught fish that have bacteria, different things growing on them, and it's from warm water.
Right.
I mean, it's common sense.
Absolutely.
So
I'm gonna let maybe Lance talk about some of the interactions that the trees and the things that trees produce have on the aquatic environment. But a big one that's important to me when I think about that rolling lawn right down to the stream's edge is, here we are in Southern Oregon. We get pretty severe rain events in the winter. Sometimes we get those snow events that are followed by a warm rain event. You get that rain on snow feature, right, where the stream flows just come way up really fast. In a forested area where you've got lots of trees and shrubs growing near the stream, the banks are protected from really unnatural levels of erosion that would just peel tons of fine sediment off the stream banks into the stream itself, where that sediment can do all kinds of damage. Mm-hmm. That erosion happens naturally to a much lesser degree in a forested area. When you just have a lawn, you're opening that stretch of river or creek front up to really severe erosion. So the landowner's losing usable land, and all of that sediment is going into the stream, where it can smother fish nests, where it can smother invertebrates that are living in the sediment. So bad for the health of the stream, bad for the quality of the water. If it happened here on South Fork Little Butte Creek, all of that turbidity would flow down and go to the Medford Water Commission's intake, where they would have to filter it out before they send it to somebody's house living in Talent or Jacksonville or Eagle Point. So those are the things I see. You want to talk about biology a little bit, Lance?
Sure. Well, those are the two big things. Erosion is definitely when you're clearing a lot of vegetation off. And I mean, grass has a lot of roots, but it's not going to hold up very well to a large flow event. It's going to get probably ripped out pretty easily. And of course, the trees and the shrubs, they're exchanging nutrients with the stream, which is huge. And they're actually, if you have runoff coming down a hill slope and you have all this vegetation with root system, it's filtering out nutrients and exchanging those nutrients with the water. So that's really important too. Even though grass could do that to a certain extent, having a much, larger, healthier, diverse forest is going to do more of that. And as we talked about earlier in this interview, is the leaves and needles falling into the stream and landing in the water does so much for the biology in the creek. And if you like to fish and you like going out and doing that in the river, if the fish don't have anything to eat, then there aren't going to be fish. So all of the macroinvertebrates, all the bugs that are in the water that all of the fish eat, that is super important for this exchange. So there's a lot of invertebrates that shred leaves and they turn that into food for themselves, and then in turn become food for the fish.
Makes sense.
So it's just a food web.
Well, and habitat too. I mean, you're talking about more aquatic habitat, but I think when you have just a clear-cut lawn, you're taking away homes for several other terrestrial species. People love heron, otters, beavers, all of these species that depend on the in-stream resources, but also the terrestrial lands. And when you have just a barren landscape, you're cutting that off.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things I've observed, and I'd love to hear your guys' input on this, is I feel like a lot of landowners' goals is to create a really beautiful setting, a beautiful aesthetic with their live water. And I don't feel like what you guys are suggesting be done from a stream health perspective necessarily is going to take away from that. Matter of fact, I think it can actually enhance it. And I think that's what we should talk about in a moment when we actually talk about the work being done. I don't think it's a one or the other. Like, you can never touch your waterway again. It has to be hands off versus, you know, being this golf course setting. Like, there's a meeting in the middle that actually produces, in many regards, maybe even a more aesthetically pleasing setting.